The boardroom smelled like expensive leather and cheap lies. I watched my wife, Alma, adjust her pearl necklace for the third time in 5 minutes, a nervous habit she thought nobody noticed. But I noticed everything about her these days. Had to. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, raising my tumbler of whiskey, "to another profitable quarter." The board members of Fallon Beverage Company lifted their glasses in response. Old money faces, trust fund smiles, the kind of people who inherited their opinions along with their stock portfolios. They tolerated me because I made them richer, but they'd never forget I came from the wrong side of the tracks. Alma smiled, that perfect socialite smile, the one she practiced in mirrors. "Cedric's being modest. The new distribution deal he negotiated will triple our East Coast presence." I almost believed the pride in her voice. Almost. "Just doing my job, sweetheart." I kept my tone light, but my eyes stayed on her manicured fingers as they drummed against the mahogany table. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The same pattern she'd been doing all week. Helena Rusk, Alma's best friend and our company lawyer, leaned forward. "Before we celebrate, we should discuss the quarterly projections. Some concerning trends—" "Can wait until Monday," I interrupted. Helena's jaw tightened. She hated being cut off, especially by me. The feeling was mutual. Alma placed her hand on mine. "Darling, Helena's right. We should address any issues now." Her touch felt like ice. Once upon a time, that same hand had traced patterns on my chest while she whispered about our future together. Now it felt calculating, like she was measuring my pulse for weakness. "Fine." I leaned back in my chair. "But first, let me freshen everyone's drinks." I stood and walked to the bar cart, feeling their eyes on my back. The whiskey bottle caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rain streaked the glass, turning the city lights below into watercolor smears. Perfect weather for what was coming. "Cedric makes the best drinks," Alma announced to the room. "He has such steady hands." I poured carefully, remembering the first time she'd said those words. We were newlyweds then, and she'd meant it as a compliment. Tonight, it sounded like an obituary. When I returned to the table, I set Alma's glass in front of her with extra care. She didn't notice me switch our positions while reaching for the financial reports. Why would she? In her mind, I was already finished. "Now then," Helena continued, "the concerning trends I mentioned. Actually," I said, "I have something more pressing to discuss." Alma's fingers found her pearls again. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "I mean the recording I made yesterday, of you and Rylan Ventor planning my removal from the company I built." The silence that followed was beautiful. Helena's pen stopped moving. Board member William Ashford choked on his whiskey. Alma's face went through several colors before settling on pale green. "Cedric, I don't know what you think you heard, but nothing." I pressed play. Alma's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "Once we get him out, you'll have full access to the distribution network. Helena's already prepared the paperwork to transfer his shares." Ryland's smug laugh followed. "Your husband's too trusting. Makes this almost too easy." I stopped the recording. "Should I play the part where you discuss which poison works fastest, or skip to where you plan to frame me for embezzlement?" Alma's hand trembled as she reached for her glass. "This is ridiculous. That's not even my voice." "Drink up, sweetheart." I raised my own glass. "To steady hands and perfect timing." She hesitated, glass halfway to her lips. For the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Nothing illegal. Unlike you." I took a sip of my whiskey, savoring the burn. "But I did switch our glasses while you were busy plotting my demise." Alma dropped her glass. It shattered against the marble floor, amber liquid spreading like a stain. Several board members jumped back, but I stayed perfectly still. You're insane, she breathed. No, darling, I'm awake. I stood and straightened my tie. For the first time in years, I'm completely awake. Helena finally found her voice. This is all circumstantial, doctored recordings, wild accusations. Are you willing to bet your law license on that? I asked. Because I have 3 more hours of recordings, including the one where you admit to embezzling from the Morrison account 5 years ago. Her face went ashen. That's impossible. You really should check your office for listening devices more carefully. I walked to the window, hands clasped behind my back. Did you know the janitor you bribed to plant bugs in my office used to work for me? Loyalty's funny that way. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the streets into rivers. I watched a businessman below struggle with his umbrella, fighting a losing battle against the wind. I knew exactly how he felt. What do you want? Alma's voice was barely audible. I turned back to face the room. Every eye was on me, waiting. These people who'd dismissed me as lucky, who'd whispered about my blue-collar background at their country club gatherings, who'd treated me like hired help in my own company. I want what's mine, I said simply. All of it. William Ashford cleared his throat. Cedric, perhaps we should table this discussion until... Until what? Until my wife and her accomplices finish destroying everything I've worked for? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, William, we're settling this tonight. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I walked back to my chair but didn't sit. Instead, I placed both hands flat on the table and leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Alma, you're going to resign as CFO effective immediately. Helena, you're fired. And Rylan Ventor will never set foot in this building again. You can't do this, Alma protested. The board will do exactly what's best for the company, I interrupted. Won't you, gentlemen? The silence stretched like a taut wire. Finally, William nodded slowly. Given the evidence, I think that's prudent. Alma stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. This isn't over, Cedric. You're absolutely right. I smiled, and I could feel how cold it looked. It's just beginning. She stormed out, Helena trailing behind like a whipped dog. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how quickly they could distance themselves from the wreckage. I poured myself another whiskey and returned to the window. The businessman below had given up on his umbrella and was running through the rain, jacket pulled over his head. Smart man. Sometimes the only winning move is to stop fighting the storm and start running. But I wasn't running. Not anymore. I was the storm now. The next morning brought sunshine and lawyers. Lots of lawyers. I was in my office by 6, going through files and securing documents before Alma could retaliate. She'd spent the night at Helena's place, probably planning her counterattack. Good. Let them plot. I had 3 steps ahead mapped out already. My assistant Janet knocked and entered with coffee and a worried expression. Mr. Fallon? There are several attorneys here to see you. They say it's urgent. Show them in. I straightened my tie and prepared for war. The legal team that filed into my office looked like a funeral procession in expensive suits. Leading them was Marcus Whitmore, Helena's former law partner, and a man who charged more per hour than most people made in a month. Cedric. Whitmore set his briefcase on my desk without invitation. We need to discuss last night's misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Your client conspired to remove me from my own company. Pretty straightforward. My client believes you've been under considerable stress lately. Paranoid delusions, erratic behavior, possible substance abuse. He pulled out a thick folder. We have documentation. I opened the folder and laughed. Medical records, witness statements, even photos of me leaving Blaze's boxing gym looking disheveled after workouts. They'd been building a case for months. Impressive, I admitted. Alma always was thorough. This doesn't have to get ugly, Cedric. Resign quietly, accept a generous severance package, and everyone walks away clean. Everyone except me. Whitmore shrugged. You'll have enough money to start over somewhere else? Consider it a gift. I closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. Here's my counteroffer. Tell Alma and Helena to pack their offices. They have until noon. You're making a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. I stood and walked to the door. Janet will show you out. After they left, I called Blaze. He answered on the first ring, like always. How bad? He asked without preamble. They're playing hardball, medical records, character witnesses, the works. Expected that. Your wife's not stupid, just greedy. I heard the sound of punching bags in the background. You ready for the next phase? Born ready. Good. Meet me at the gym in an hour. And Cedric, bring the recording equipment. I hung up and stared out at the city. From the 40th floor, everything looked manageable. People were ants, problems were puzzles, and revenge was just another business transaction. But down in the streets, things got messier. An hour later, I was in Blaze boxing gym, a converted warehouse that smelled like sweat and determination. Blaze Murphy had been my best friend since college, back when I was working 3 jobs to pay tuition and he was getting kicked off the football team for fighting. He'd gone into police work briefly before opening the gym, and he still had contacts throughout the city. Your wife's been busy, he said, wrapping my hands for a training session. Word is she's meeting with Rylan Ventor this afternoon, some fancy hotel downtown. The Meridian? That's the one. Presidential suite. I worked the heavy bag while Blaze talked, each punch helping me focus. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The rhythm was meditative. They think they've got you cornered, Blaze continued. Whitmore's already filed preliminary injunctions to freeze your assets pending a competency hearing. Can they do that? They can try. Helena knows the right judges. He held the bag steady while I threw combinations. But I know a few judges too. We spent the next hour planning. Blaze had connections I'd forgotten about, people who owed favors or remembered when Helena had crossed them. The legal system was like any other network. It ran on relationships and grudges. The key is timing, Blaze explained as we reviewed documents. They're moving fast because they have to. The longer this drags out, the more people start asking questions. So we slow them down. Exactly. And while they're tied up in court, we hit them where it hurts. I knew what he meant. Alma's social standing meant everything to her. She'd rather lose money than face public humiliation. Helena was the same way. Her reputation was her currency. What about Rylan? Blaze grinned, and it wasn't friendly. Leave him to me. Kid thinks he's tough because he went to Yale and drives a Porsche. Time someone taught him about real consequences. That afternoon, I positioned myself in the Meridian's lobby bar with a clear view of the elevators. Alma arrived first, looking nervous in a way I hadn't seen since our wedding day. She'd changed clothes 3 times, based on the wrinkles in her dress. Old habits. Rylan showed up 20 minutes later, all swagger and expensive cologne. He was younger than me by a decade, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never being told no. Trust fund baby made good, the golden boy of his father's investment firm. I waited until they were in the elevator before following. The presidential suite was on the 20th floor, and the hallway was empty except for a housekeeping cart. Perfect. I'd brought a small recording device, military-grade equipment Blaze had acquired through his police contacts. It could pick up conversations through walls, and the presidential suite's doors were solid wood, not steel. Sure this will work? Alma was saying as I positioned the device. Relax, darling. Whitmore knows what he's doing. By tomorrow, your husband will be declared mentally incompetent and you'll have full control of the company. But what if he fights it? Cedric's not stupid. Rylan laughed. He's not smart either, or he would have seen this coming months ago. Face it, Alma. You married beneath you, and now you're correcting that mistake. I gritted my teeth and kept recording. Helena says the board will support us once they see the medical evidence, Alma continued. But some of them like Cedric. They like money more. Once we show them the expansion plans, they'll forget all about your blue-collar husband. He wasn't always blue-collar. He built that company from nothing. With your family's money and connections. Don't romanticize it, sweetheart. He was useful for a while, but now he's a liability. There was a pause, then the sound of glasses clinking. To new beginnings, Rylan said. To getting what we deserve, Alma replied. I had enough, more than enough. I packed up the equipment and headed for the elevator, mind racing with possibilities. They thought they had me cornered, but they'd just handed me the ammunition I needed. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside with a businessman in a rumpled suit. He looked like he'd been running through rain, jacket still damp from the storm that had blown through that morning. Rough day? I asked. He nodded wearily. My wife filed for separation this morning. Apparently, I'm not the man she married anymore. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I said as we reached the lobby. Sometimes people need to see who you really are. He looked at me strangely, but I was already walking away, phone in hand. Time to call Blay and set the next phase in motion. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising another night of rain. Perfect weather for what came next. The recording from the hotel suite was better than I'd hoped. Clear audio, damning statements, and enough evidence to bury Alma and Rylan in court. But court was slow, and I was done being patient. Blaze met me at my apartment that evening, bringing Chinese takeout and a folder full of intelligence. My place was modest compared to the mansion I'd shared with Alma, but it was clean and private. More importantly, it was mine. Your wife's been making calls, Blaze said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. Reached out to every board member, several major investors, and at least 3 journalists. Damage control? Character assassination. She's painting you as unstable, possibly dangerous. Says you've been drinking heavily and making threats. I opened a beer and considered this. Any of it sticking? Some. William Ashford seems nervous, and the Hendersons are asking questions. But most people are waiting to see how this plays out. And Helena? Blaze's expression darkened. That's where it gets interesting. Turns out our lawyer friend has been busy. Remember the Morrison account embezzlement I mentioned? That was just the tip of the iceberg. He pulled out a bank statement and slid it across the table. Helena's been skimming from client accounts for years. Small amounts, different clients, very sophisticated. But she got greedy with your company. I studied the numbers. How much? Close to $2 million, spread across 5 years. She's been using Alma as cover, making it look like legitimate business expenses. Alma knew? Hard to say. Your wife's smart, but Helena's smarter. Could go either way. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. This changes everything. Gets better. I had a friend in the DA's office run Helena's financials. She's been living way above her means. Expensive condo, luxury car, country club memberships, all funded by client money. Evidence? Solid. Bank records, forged signatures, the works. Enough to put her away for a decade, minimum. I smiled for the first time in days. What about Rylan? Kid's clean, legally speaking, but he's got other vulnerabilities. Blaze pulled out a photograph. Recognize this? The photo showed Rylan leaving a downtown apartment building with a woman who definitely wasn't Alma. She was younger, prettier, and wearing clothes that cost more than most people's cars. Who is she? Melissa Chen, daughter of Judge Chen, also happens to be married to District Attorney Morrison. I whistled low. Rylan's been busy. Gets better. Melissa's husband has been investigating financial crimes in the business sector. If he found out his wife was having an affair with someone connected to Helena's embezzlement, he'd crucify them all. Exactly. And I happen to know Morrison's been looking for a high-profile case to boost his political career. We spent the next hour planning. The key was coordination. Hit them all at once, before they could regroup or destroy evidence. Helena first, since she was the weakest link. Then Alma, using the hotel recording and financial evidence. Finally, Rylan, with the photographs and his connection to Helena's crimes. What about the board? I asked. Once they see the evidence, they'll distance themselves faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. These people didn't get rich by backing losers. And if they don't? Blaze grinned. Then we get creative. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and called an emergency board meeting. Janet sent out the notices with strict instructions. Attendance was mandatory, and the meeting was confidential. By 10 a.m., they were all there. William Ashford, the Henderson twins, Margaret Frost, and James Chen. No relation to the judge, unfortunately. Old money, new money, and everything in between. The people who'd trusted me to make them richer and were now wondering if they'd backed the wrong horse. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the head of the conference table. I know there have been concerns about my leadership lately, so I wanted to address them directly. William shifted uncomfortably. Cedric, perhaps we should wait for legal counsel. Helena won't be joining us, I interrupted. She's otherwise occupied. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Blaze. Package delivered. At that moment, Helena was being arrested at her condo for embezzlement. The DA had moved faster than expected, probably motivated by the anonymous tip about his wife's affair. Sometimes the stars align perfectly. As I was saying, I continued, there have been some serious allegations made against me. Accusations of instability, financial impropriety, even substance abuse. Margaret Frost leaned forward. Cedric, we're all concerned about you. Perhaps a leave of absence would be exactly what my wife and her co-conspirators want. I activated the room's audio system and played the hotel recording. The board members listened in stunned silence as Alma and Rylan's voices filled the room. By the time it finished, several faces had gone pale. That's not all, I said, distributing copies of Helena's financial records. Your trusted legal counsel has been stealing from the company for years. The FBI raided her office an hour ago. James Chen studied the documents with a lawyer's eye. This is extensive. $2 million, give or take, all funneled through accounts Helena controlled, with Alma's signature on the authorization forms. You're saying Alma was involved? William asked. I'm saying Alma was either complicit or criminally negligent. Either way, she's a liability this company can't afford. The room erupted in whispered conversations. I let them process the information while I poured myself coffee from the service cart. The city looked different from up here today, cleaner, more manageable, like a problem that could be solved with the right tools. What do you propose? Margaret finally asked. Alma resigns immediately. We cooperate fully with the federal investigation, and we implement new financial oversight procedures to prevent this from happening again. And if Alma refuses to resign? I smiled coldly. She won't. My phone rang as if on cue. Alma's number flashed on the screen. Excuse me, I said to the board, then answered. Hello, darling. You bastard. Her voice was shrill with panic. Helena's been arrested. They're saying she stole money. Imagine that. This is your doing. You set her up. I didn't have to set anyone up. Helena did this to herself, just like you did. There was a long pause. What do you want? Your resignation, effective immediately. Go to hell. Already been there. It looks a lot like being married to you. I hung up and turned back to the board. She'll resign by close of business today. How can you be sure? William asked. Because the alternative is federal prison. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. Alma may be many things, but she's not stupid. She'll take the deal. And she did. By 3 p.m., I had her resignation letter, along with a formal statement accepting full responsibility for the financial irregularities. Her lawyer had worked fast, probably hoping to minimize her exposure in the federal investigation. Rylan was next. I found him at his office, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed new money. He was on the phone when I walked in, probably trying to do damage control with his own clients. "I'll call you back," he said, hanging up quickly. "Cedric, I heard about Helena. Terrible business. Isn't it?" I sat down across from his desk without invitation. Amazing how these things snowball. Look, if this is about Alma, it's about you. I placed the photograph of him and Melissa Chen on his desk. Nice girl. Married, I believe? His face went white. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? What matters is what happens next." "What do you want?" "You're going to end your relationship with Alma. You're going to withdraw from any business dealings with my company, and you're going to disappear from my life completely." "And if I don't?" I leaned forward. Then Melissa's husband sees this photo, along with the hotel receipts, the jewelry purchases, and the very interesting text messages my friend recovered from her phone. Rylan's hands were shaking. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I stood and straightened my jacket. District Attorney Morrison is already investigating Helena's embezzlement. How do you think he'll react when he discovers his wife's affair with a key witness? I left him sitting there, staring at the photograph like it might catch fire. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone was buzzing with frantic calls from Alma. I ignored them all. The war was almost over. Now came the final battle. The lakeside estate had been in Alma's family for 3 generations, a sprawling monument to old money and older secrets. I'd spent countless weekends there during our marriage, playing the dutiful husband at garden parties and charity events. Tonight it would serve a different purpose. Blaze had done his work well. The staff had been given the evening off, the security system was temporarily disabled, and the main house was empty except for the people I'd invited. Alma, Rylan, and Helena, who'd made bail that afternoon thanks to her high-priced attorney. I arrived first, letting myself in with the key Alma had never bothered to take back. The house felt different in the darkness. Larger, more menacing. Rain was starting again, drumming against the tall windows like impatient fingers. I set up the equipment in the main parlor, a room dominated by oil paintings of Alma's ancestors, stern-faced men and women who'd built their fortune on steel and shipping, back when America was young and hungry. They'd understand what I was doing tonight. Business was business, and betrayal had consequences. Alma arrived 20 minutes later, her Bentley crunching on the gravel driveway. She entered through the front door like she owned the place, which technically she did, for now. "Cedric?" Her voice echoed in the foyer. "What's this about?" "In here, darling." She found me in the parlor, sitting in her grandfather's leather chair with a glass of his bourbon, the good stuff, aged 20 years and worth more than most people's cars. "You look comfortable," she said, but her voice was tight with nerves. "I should. I've been paying the taxes on this place for 5 years. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit. We're waiting for the others." "What others?" "Your co-conspirators, though I suppose that term's a bit harsh now that one of them's been indicted." Alma remained standing, pacing to the window and back. "Helena's situation has nothing to do with me." "Doesn't it? Your signature's on half the authorization forms. I sign dozens of forms every week. I can't be expected to verify every detail." "Even when those details involve $2 million? She spun to face me. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching everything fall apart?" "I'm enjoying the truth finally coming out. There's a difference." Headlights swept across the window as another car arrived. Rylan, right on schedule. He'd probably spent the afternoon trying to figure out damage control, maybe even considered running. But men like him didn't run. They doubled down and hoped their money could buy them out of trouble. He entered the parlor looking like he'd aged a decade since our last meeting. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the nervous energy of a man who knew he was in over his head. Cedric, Alma. He nodded to each of us, then took a position near the fireplace. I assume this is about Helena's arrest? Among other things. I took another sip of bourbon, savoring the burn. We're still waiting for one more guest. Helena's not coming, Alma said quickly. Her lawyer advised against it. Smart lawyer. Unfortunately, Helena's not that smart. As if summoned, the front door opened again. Helena's heels clicked across the marble foyer, each step echoing like a gunshot. She appeared in the doorway looking defiant despite the circumstances, chin raised in the aristocratic pose she'd perfected over the years. "This is highly inappropriate," she announced. "I'm under federal indictment. My attorney explicitly forbade any contact with potential witnesses." "Then you shouldn't have come." I stood and walked to the bar cart, pouring 3 more glasses of bourbon. "But you're here because you need to know how much I know." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." I handed out the glasses, noting how Helena's hand trembled slightly when she took hers. "Let me enlighten you." I activated the recording equipment I'd hidden around the room. Not the obvious devices. Those were decoys. The real equipment was built into the furniture itself, courtesy of Blaze's contacts in the surveillance business. 5 years ago, I began, Helena embezzled $50,000 from the Morrison account. Small amount, easy to hide, probably seemed like a victimless crime. "That's ridiculous," Helena protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "The problem with stealing is that it gets easier each time. 50 became 100. 100 became 200. Before long, you were skimming from every major client, including my company." I pulled out a thick folder and set it on the coffee table. Bank records, forged signatures, falsified expense reports. The FBI has all of this now thanks to an anonymous tip. Alma was staring at Helena with growing horror. "Please tell me this isn't true." Helena's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The overhead, the client expectations, the lifestyle requirements, so you decided to steal. I decided to borrow. I was going to pay it back." "With what? Your law practice was failing, your investments were underwater, and you were spending money faster than you could steal it." Rylan cleared his throat. "This is all very interesting, but what does it have to do with me?" I smiled and pulled out the photographs. Everything. The pictures scattered across the coffee table like playing cards. Rylan and Melissa Chen at restaurants, hotels, her apartment building. The evidence of their affair laid out in glossy detail. "You've been busy," I said. "Unfortunately, so have I." Rylan's face went ashen. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, how long before her husband finds out?" "What do you want?" The question came from all 3 of them simultaneously, which would have been funny under different circumstances. I walked back to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The lake beyond was choppy, whitecaps visible even in the darkness. Storm weather, the kind that sank boats and drowned the unprepared. "I want what's mine," I said finally. "All of it." "The company?" Alma asked. "The company, the house, the accounts, the reputation you tried to destroy. Everything you took or tried to take." "That's impossible," Helena said. "Even if we wanted to cooperate, the legal complications alone are your problem, not mine." I turned back to face them. "Here's what's going to happen. Alma, you're going to sign over your shares in the company to me, all of them." "I can't do that. Your family built their fortune on steel and shipping. They'd understand the concept of consequences for betrayal." "And me?" Rylan asked. "You're going to end your relationship with Alma, withdraw from any business dealings with my company, and transfer the Morrison account back to Helena's replacement. What Morrison account? I smiled coldly. The one you stole when Helena got arrested. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? His silence was answer enough. As for you, Helena, I continued, you're going to make a full confession to the FBI, implicating anyone else involved in your embezzlement scheme. I'll go to prison. You're going to prison anyway. The only question is for how long and who goes with you. The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows. I let them process the implications while I finished my bourbon. The liquid burned, but it was a clean burn, nothing like the acid that had been eating at my stomach for months. You can't force us to do any of this, Alma said finally. Can I? I walked to the parlor's entertainment center and activated the large screen television. Let me show you something interesting. The screen filled with security footage from the hotel where Alma and Rylan had been meeting. High-definition video of them entering and leaving together, timestamps showing the duration of their visits, audio of their conversations in the elevator. Hotel security systems are remarkably sophisticated these days, I observed, and the staff are surprisingly cooperative when you explain the situation properly. More footage followed. Helena entering and leaving the company offices at odd hours, accessing files she had no business touching, meeting with clients whose accounts she was embezzling from. The FBI will find all of this very interesting, I continued. Especially the part where you three conspired to remove me from my own company. This is entrapment, Helena protested weakly. No, this is evidence. There's a difference. I turned off the television and faced them again. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Sign the papers, make the confessions, and accept the consequences of your actions. Or spend the next decade fighting federal charges while your reputations burn to the ground. And if we comply? Alma asked. Helena goes to minimum security prison for a few years, instead of maximum security for decades. Rylan keeps his business and his freedom, assuming he stays away from married women. And you, darling wife, get to keep your social standing and family reputation intact. What about us? Alma's voice was barely a whisper. Our marriage? I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Young, ambitious, beautiful, full of dreams and plans for our future together. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Our marriage ended the moment you decided I was expendable, I said simply. Everything else is just paperwork. Thunder rolled across the lake, shaking the windows in their frames. The storm was getting worse, but I felt calmer than I had in months. The truth was finally out, the cards were on the table, and the game was almost over. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, I said, walking toward the door. Don't disappoint me. I left them sitting in the parlor, three conspirators who'd discovered that betrayal was a double-edged sword. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets, turning the driveway into a river and the lake into a cauldron. Perfect weather for endings. The annual Fallon Beverage Company gala was held at the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, the same building where I'd recorded Alma and Rylan's conspiracy 3 weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I'd chosen the venue deliberately. Sometimes the best revenge is served in familiar surroundings. I arrived fashionably late, after the cocktail hour had loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. The ballroom was packed with the city's elite, business leaders, politicians, socialites, and journalists. Everyone who mattered in our small corner of the world all gathered to celebrate another profitable year. They didn't know they were actually attending a funeral. Alma was near the bar, surrounded by her usual circle of admirers. She looked stunning in a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. The picture of elegance and success, if you didn't know the truth. Helena was notably absent, having been remanded to federal custody that morning when her bail was revoked. Apparently, fleeing to Switzerland wasn't considered acceptable behavior for someone awaiting trial. Her lawyer had tried to argue that it was a pre-planned vacation, but the FBI disagreed. Ryland stood near the windows overlooking the city, nursing a whiskey and looking like a man attending his own execution, which, in a way, he was. His affair with Melissa Chen had become public knowledge 3 days ago, thanks to an anonymous tip to the city's gossip columnists. The subsequent scandal had cost him several major clients and his engagement to a senator's daughter. I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and deflecting questions about the recent personnel changes at the company. The board members were all present, looking relieved that the crisis had been resolved with minimal damage to their investments. They'd adapted quickly to the new reality, as wealthy people always do. "Cedric!" William Ashford appeared at my elbow, bourbon on his breath and relief in his eyes. "Wonderful turnout tonight. The company's never looked stronger." "Thank you, William. I'm glad you approve of the new direction." "Absolutely. Though I have to say, we were all shocked by Helena's situation." "Crime has a way of shocking people," I agreed, "especially when it hits close to home." Margaret Frost joined our conversation, elegant in silver silk and pearls. "I hope Alma's doing well, given the circumstances. This must be terribly difficult for her." "Alma's resilient. She'll land on her feet." "Of course, though I imagine the divorce proceedings will be complex." "Actually, they're quite simple. Alma's been very cooperative." Which was true. Faced with the choice between cooperation and federal prison, she'd signed everything I'd put in front of her. The company shares, the house, even the lakeside estate. Her lawyer had advised against it, but Alma understood the alternative. The evening progressed with the usual mixture of business and pleasure. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and awards were presented to employees who'd contributed to our success. I played the gracious host, accepting praise for the company's performance while privately savoring the knowledge that my enemies were watching their world collapse. At 10 p.m., I took the stage for my traditional closing remarks. The ballroom fell silent as I approached the podium. 500 faces turned toward me in expectation. I'd given this speech dozens of times before, but tonight was different. Tonight was my masterpiece. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "thank you for joining us at what has been a truly memorable year for Fallon Beverage Company." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I waited for it to subside before continuing. "This year has taught us many valuable lessons about loyalty, integrity, and the true cost of success. We've learned that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. We've discovered that some people view relationships as transactions and loyalty as a commodity to be bought and sold." The applause was more subdued now, as people began to sense that this wasn't a typical corporate speech. I could see Alma near the bar, her face pale with growing realization. "We've also learned that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never denied, that actions have consequences, and that the truth, no matter how carefully buried, always finds a way to surface." I paused to take a sip of water, letting the tension build. The ballroom was completely silent now, everyone hanging on my words. "Some of you may have heard rumors about recent changes in our company leadership. Allow me to address those rumors directly." I activated the room's audio-visual system, and the screens around the ballroom came to life. The hotel recording began to play, Alma and Ryland's voices filling the room with crystal clarity. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps, whispers, and shocked exclamations erupted from the crowd as they listened to the conspiracy unfold. I watched Alma's face go from pale to green as her own words condemned her in front of everyone who mattered in her world. "That recording was made 3 weeks ago," I said as the audio ended. "It documents a conspiracy to remove me from the company I built, using forged medical records and fabricated evidence of mental instability." More screens activated, showing Helena's financial records, the evidence of her embezzlement, and the paper trail that connected her crimes to Alma's accounts. The crowd was riveted, unable to look away from the train wreck unfolding before them. The FBI investigation has uncovered over $2 million in stolen funds, forged signatures, and falsified documents. 3 people have been indicted, including our former legal counsel Helena Rusk, who was arrested this morning attempting to flee the country. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably texting friends and colleagues with the breaking news. By morning, this would be the talk of the city. By next week, it would be a case study in business schools. But tonight isn't about crime and punishment, I continued. Tonight is about new beginnings, about building something stronger from the ashes of betrayal. I raised my glass, the same crystal tumbler I'd used on the night this all began. So I propose a toast. To truth, to justice, and to the understanding that some mistakes can never be forgiven. The crowd raised their glasses uncertainly, not sure what they were toasting but afraid to refuse. I could see the confusion on their faces, the mixture of shock and fascination that comes from witnessing someone's complete destruction. To my wife Alma, I said, looking directly at her across the room, who taught me that love and loyalty are not the same thing. To Rylan Ventor, who showed me that some people mistake kindness for weakness. And to Helena Rusk, who proved that intelligence without integrity is just clever stupidity. I took a sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. May they all get exactly what they deserve. The silence that followed was deafening. 500 people holding their breath, waiting to see what happened next. I could feel the power in that moment, the absolute control over everyone in the room. Then Rylan snapped. "You sanctimonious bastard!" he shouted, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. "You think you're so perfect? You think you're the victim here?" Security moved to intercept him, but I waved them off. "Let him come. Let everyone see what desperation looked like." "You want to know the truth?" Rylan continued, his face red with rage and alcohol. "Your precious wife came to me. She was tired of being married to a blue-collar nobody who got lucky." The crowd was eating it up, phones out recording everything. This would be on social media within minutes, viral by morning. Perfect. "She told me you were boring, predictable, that you had no vision beyond your little beverage company. She wanted someone with ambition, someone who understood what real success looked like." "Is that what she told you?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "That I was the problem?" "You were never good enough for her. Everyone knew it, everyone could see it. You were just too blind and arrogant to admit it." I smiled, and I could feel how cold it looked. "You're absolutely right, Rylan. I was blind. Blind to what my wife really was, blind to what people like you and Helena were planning. But I'm not blind anymore." I gestured to the screens around the room, which now showed the photographs of Rylan and Melissa Chen. "Tell me, how's your relationship with the district attorney's wife? Still meeting at the downtown apartment, or has that become too risky?" Rylan's face went white. The crowd's attention shifted to the photographs, whispers and gasps filling the air as they recognized the woman in the pictures. "You see, ladies and gentlemen," I continued, "Mr. Ventor here has been very busy. While conspiring to destroy my company, he's also been having an affair with a married woman, the wife of the district attorney who's prosecuting Helena for embezzlement." The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about corruption, adultery, and the kind of scandal that destroyed careers and reputations. "But don't worry, Rylan," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm sure District Attorney Morrison will be very understanding when he finds out his wife's lover was connected to a federal embezzlement case. I'm sure it won't affect his objectivity at all." Rylan lunged toward the stage, but security finally intervened. 2 large men in black suits grabbed his arms and began escorting him toward the exit, his shouts and curses echoing through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice over the commotion, "I apologize for the disruption, but sometimes the truth is messy." I finished my whiskey and set the glass down on the podium. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Drive safely and remember, in business, as in life, character is everything. I walked off the stage to stunned silence, leaving behind a room full of people who would be talking about this night for years to come. The crowd parted as I made my way toward the exit, everyone wanting to see me, but no one sure what to say. Near the door, I passed Alma. She was standing alone now, her circle of admirers having melted away like snow in sunlight. Her face was streaked with tears, her perfect makeup ruined. "Cedric," she whispered as I approached. "Please, we need to talk." I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved, the woman who'd tried to destroy me. "No," I said simply. "We really don't." I walked out into the night, leaving her standing there in her expensive dress and borrowed diamonds. Behind me, the ballroom buzzed with conversation as 500 people tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Outside, it was raining again. The doorman offered me an umbrella, but I waved him off. The rain felt good, clean, and cold against my skin. I stood there for a moment, letting it wash over me while I watched the city lights blur and dance. My phone buzzed with a text from Blay. "Saw the live stream. Nicely done. Drinks?" I smiled and typed back, "On my way." I walked down the street, hands in my pockets, rain soaking through my expensive suit. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and reporters, investigations and depositions. The fallout from tonight would take months to settle, and there would be consequences I hadn't anticipated. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I was free. I'd poured the glass they'd tried to make me drink. Now they could taste it themselves. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean, and I walked through it like a man reborn. Behind me, the lights of the Meridian Hotel glowed through the storm, marking the spot where I'd finally learned the difference between justice and revenge. Sometimes, they're the same thing.